Hello and welcome everyone to this live stream teaching from Marshall Vian Summers. The topic Marshall will be speaking about today is assessing the alien and non-human intelligence presence and intent. I'm Tyne Andrews and will be the host for this live stream teaching from Marshall today. I'd like to share a little bit about Marshall for those that may not know him. Marshall's work began in 1981. He started to receive and compile a body of work that contains a preparation for humanity's emergence into the greater community of intelligent life in this universe. And in support of this, Marshall's work also grew to present a process for developing our individual and collective innate instinctual intelligence. And in his work, this is referred to as inner knowing or self-knowledge. His book, Steps to Knowledge, the Book of Inner Knowing, was accorded Book of the Year in the United States. This book is a book of practices to develop this inner knowing and self-knowledge, which is increasingly essential for living and navigating today's world. And today we have the opportunity to hear Marshall speak, where we can learn about assessing the presence and intent of alien and non-human intelligence in our world. So just a quick overview for our time together. First, we'll hear from Marshall, and he'll give his teaching. Then we'll go to the live broadcast chat on Discord for about 30 minutes to share our thoughts and considerations of the question that will be posed today. Then we'll return here to the same YouTube channel for a brief discussion by Marshall. So again, thank you all for being here to receive this teaching from Marshall today. And with that, let us hear from Marshall.
Thank you, Tyne. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'd like to speak about a topic that's very central to the theme of this teaching, which is discerning the extraterrestrial presence in the world today, which is becoming much more well known in the public, which has been known about for a long time within our inner government and certain individuals. It's playing a very significant role in altering the landscape, the mental landscape, and to some degrees the physical landscape of our world, yet remains hidden and undisclosed from us. So today I really want to talk about how we can discern this at the most elemental and fundamental levels, which is the level of natural history or natural selection and human history. Because these things are certainly to be interpreted, but are well established within our understanding, basically. There are controversies, but basically well established, and should be a significant reference point for us to understand the threshold we're now facing, which has not been discerned very clearly over 40 or 50 years of UFO research and public opinion, which is kind of all over the place as people bring into this their own preferences, theories, personal needs, and preferences. So we're facing a reality that we're not really discerning very clearly. And I believe that what I'll be sharing with you today may aid us in doing that at a very fundamental level, beyond ideas, beliefs, and projections. Now, I'm not a historian. I'm not a natural history historian or a historian in general, but these things I'll be sharing with you are common knowledge and can be easily researched and explored online. So assessing the ET presence at the level of nature and history should be our starting point. We should start there because that's the ground and foundation of life on Earth and life as we know it. Yet I see very few people doing this in the public arena. It's amazingly lacking in our approach to this whole subject. But I'm going to approach it at this level because this level teaches us a lot about life, how life works and will work and is working in our world today. What I'll be presenting will generate a lot of questions, perhaps controversies. If I say something that challenges something you believe in or assume to be true, I can only ask you to open your mind for a moment and just consider what I'm saying. I'm not trying to win you over. I'm not trying to tell you this is the absolute truth and you should believe in it, but I'm presenting a perspective that gives us the eyes to see, to understand the situation perhaps much more clearly than would be possible otherwise. So in the history of natural selection, the history of nature, particularly dealing with the top of the food chain, the apex species, the top of the species that basically has preeminence over everything that exists below it, in terms of survival, in terms of dominance, and in terms of capability. So this is important because humanity has established itself as the apex species on Earth for quite a long time. Um, we're not really challenged as a species by other organisms unless they be, plagues or serious disease, communicable diseases. Those things do challenge us. But basically, there's no other life form here that's challenging our preeminence in this world. So that makes us the apex, or the top of this pyramid of life. And that pyramid is now being challenged by the presence of hidden extraterrestrial forces in the world who are operating surreptitiously behind the scenes without our approval or understanding, and showing great ability in this regard. So nature has demonstrated that the apex species is usually one species within any environment. There's no two apex species coexisting for very long because one will outperform the other, have greater adaptation, greater influence, maybe greater power that makes them preeminent. So nature has told us that at any given time, there are preeminent species in the world. It's usually one species that has that position. So I'm approaching this to view the universe in the context of nature, because nature exists there too. High technology alters the landscapes of world, but it doesn't necessarily change what nature is. The forces of nature, the forces of change, the forces of geophysical change, all the things that affect any species' ability to thrive and to succeed in life. And so this is a very good approach, rather than thinking that it could be anything out there. Then we're in the sphere of endless speculation, rather to assume that it is a natural environment as well. And what we recognize as natural laws and selection is probably what exists out there as well, which makes the universe a very competitive environment, which is how I think we should regard it. There's no magic kingdoms out there, as people often hope for, but it is a real world by real forces, many of which we can discern and understand. So we can understand from our natural history what preeminence means in nature. We have a very well-founded history, at least as far back as it can go, pretty far back, as to what preeminence means in terms of the animal kingdom. The domain predator, for example, which is really the context I'm talking, the domain of the apex predator. And there's been a lot of writing about this, so you can certainly explore it for yourself. So set that as the background, and we'll talk a little about human history, which has largely been, in the records, a history of competition, conquest, submission, more powerful nations attacking and dominating others, sometimes through military action, sometimes through persuasion, sometimes through economic dependence. But there's competition for resources, because resources that we require for life are rare, difficult to find. And this is probably true throughout the universe. Habitable planets that can provide a foundation for life to grow naturally, are probably very much the exception to the rule. And so that makes our world very valuable, not only to us, but to any other race who's looking at it, who has those kinds of needs. So we're sitting on a planet of high value, and now it's being infiltrated. This is not a visitation, it is a habitation. 80 or 90 years of this presence in its current form is not visitation, it is habitation. They are investing themselves in this world for themselves, without informing us of what they're doing, why they're doing it, and what it will ultimately lead to in terms of their assessment plans. So this process of competition now we're facing at the level of preeminence. Something we've never really had to do before, we're now having to do in ways that are entirely new to us. And we're confounded by it, we're not seeing it, we don't want to see it, it's too challenging, it's upsetting, we deny it, we think of other things, or we try to turn it into a continuation of our desires, our needs, and our own development. So people think, well, whoever's here is really here to help us get through the hazards of our current environmental situation, to teach us how to live in peace, provide for us access to unlimited resources, basically to make us more powerful, stronger, more secure. But that's not nature. That's human preference. That's what we want. But the human record and the natural record don't really support this. So we can either hold these ideas, which are a projection of our own psychology upon a universe we don't understand, because we know nothing about life in the universe. We just think it is what we think it is. Or it's an extenuation of what we know to be true here on Earth in terms of culture and civilization and interaction between races. But aside from nature itself, the universe is probably a very different environment. So we should assume that competition for habitable worlds such as our own are quite common. Now, habitable worlds like our own have prevented intervention before because our world is a hothouse of life, which means it's also a hothouse of contamination to any race that approaches it living in sterile environments, which is probably the reality of anyone who travels in space or lives in space. So the world has a tremendous biological hazard to visitors from beyond. To assume that they have been able to counteract this in all situations is probably not true. In fact, I've heard it estimated that within our world alone, there are 1,300,000 different kinds of viruses or organisms that can make us sick. This is natural science in our own world. And we've only studied 30,000 of them. So the potential even to be contaminated with our own world without exposure from beyond is actually still quite high. And we're now in the world facing a bird flu, which is highly dangerous if it were to jump to humans, with huge mortality. So we're still living in this bio-environment of biological hazard because our own environment has biological hazard tremendously. The greatest loss of human life in the past has not been through wars. It's been through plague, contaminations. It's in our historical record. So, in the universe, a planet like ours may be tremendously valuable for its resources, its natural resources, mineral resources, but it's also a planet that has huge biohazard. So the Earth has been visited many times throughout its history and even prehistory, but there's no evidence that an extraterrestrial force has actually established itself here permanently in the world. There's no traces of that, there's no elements of that. There's cave paintings, and I've seen some of these even out in nature, but that does not determine an extraterrestrial presence and habitation on Earth. But of course, today there's a plethora of projections and ideas about extraterrestrials living here before us, or living with us, living underground, or their ancestors from the past, or there are future reality, everything but the natural picture, which is the most essential picture, which is the most proven picture. So if we avoid that, we're really kind of in the realm of subjective projection, preferred projection. So the NHI presence is now becoming 1,000 different things from 1,000 different points of view. And I think we're missing the basic elements on what we're facing here. This is a presence long-standing, well-established in the world, that's operating with impunity in their world, affecting governments, affecting societies, taking people against their will, which is something I will not speak more about today, but which is very important, and having a huge impact on our psychology, our preferences, and our ability to understand ourselves. So people want to think about contact in terms of beneficial outcomes, personal fulfillment, or the fulfillment of ancient prophecies. But this is not what our history tells us or advises us. So that's why I'm going to bring this down to the most fundamental level of life engagement, the ground being of life engagement, which is the ground being of the natural history record and also our human history record. According to the Allies of Humanity briefings, these intervening forces represent not great powers, but resource explorers and economic collectives, small networks employed by larger powers to find out resources and planets of value. If this is true, then our visitors who promise us everything we can't provide for ourselves really do not have the power to provide any of it. It's all a narrative. It's all seduction. And this, of course, we're the native peoples now facing a world being intervened by forces from beyond our world or beyond our sphere of reality or awareness. What has history taught us about what happened to native forces who are facing intervention? We know this without exception. It leads to their annihilation or subjugation, disappearance eventually from most of them. So this could be an exception to that. It could be very different. But 80 years of their presence here has not demonstrated that in any degree at all. So never think if they're not attacking us, they must be our friends. Because between those two extremes, there's all kinds of possibilities. A clever race that's not military in nature, which is true in this case, would want to plant itself in our midst and create avenues of persuasion and influence behind the scenes, unrecognized by the native peoples. And they can do this. They can fly in our skies, and that's been witnessed by millions of people, but that's not where they live. They're probably living in the oceans because only 10% of the oceans have been mapped. The rest of it is unknown. It's a wilderness to us. And these craft obviously can operate in that environment. It's been reported recently very astutely. So we're the native peoples of the world barely understanding what's happening on our planet. The growing presence of an extraterrestrial force, not military, economic, but very persuasive. Their power is in the mental environment. If you can persuade people to think what you want them to think and to feel what you want them to feel, you don't need weapons. And I think for us, still living in kind of a Star Wars mentality, looking at the universe, which is our primitive approach to life, we don't really recognize how races and nations interact with each other in the universe. They don't destroy worlds. They don't destroy people's natural environments. Those are valuable. Persuasion, seduction, dissuasion, forces in the mental environment. That's how you win over a race. And we're a very armed, violent race. So if to attack us would destroy the value of the world, might destroy them and us. That's not how this is happening. That confuses us because if we think they're not attacking us, like the way we think that an enemy would attack us or a competitor would attack us, then we think it's probably okay, or I'm not going to think about it. This is not intelligent. So in the background, people who come in contact with this force, or through its representatives, its human representatives, are seduced by promises of power, technology, and salvation through back channels and individual contact. At a time when humanity is facing unprecedented environmental decline, economic decline, and great threat from our own natural weather, climate, and political instability. Very vulnerable time for humanity. Perfect time for intervention. As humanity loses faith in its leadership, institutions, social norms, perfect intervention, time for intervention, time to persuade people that there is something better in the world for them. And they need to turn their eyes and their hearts and their minds to that. So we have to learn from this history again, as our teacher, that intervention is always carried out for acquisition, control, and domination. Always. It's not a maybe could be, and maybe should be. Oh, it could be this, and it could be that, and perhaps they're trying to nurture us into greater health and stability. No, history. History. Natural history would indicate that these intervening races are challenging us to be us, for them to become the new apex power in the world. Because no two races have apex power. One is going to overshadow or overcompete or even destroy the other. So think about it like this. We're destroying a rare planet of value, tremendous value, this desired by others. But they're not going to take it by force because that would destroy the value of the world and us as a workforce. They can't live here because they can't tolerate the biological hazard of the world. They're not adapted to it. So they need to find a way to establish their preeminence here through some kind of human means, human but different than us, that can adapt to this world. So this is a picture to be considered. Nobody's talking about this. I don't hear this talked about very much as a real possibility, which is amazing because this is what nature and evolution would indicate for us or encourage us to understand. And we're being heavily seduced by these forces, seduced on promises of power, wealth, freedom, spiritual fulfillment, and yet undermined at the other end by degrading our faith in our own governments, by undermining our military abilities, and I believe also affecting international relations. Promoting a greater wedge, a greater distance, a greater opposition between major world powers by affecting their leaders primarily. We see that happening. The world is looking more dangerous, not less dangerous. The prospect of war is greater, not less. Prospect of conflict erupting at any time is more evident today than it has been since probably World War II. So what we're seeing here, according to the natural picture, is a kind of divide and conquer strategy that's carried out to undermine people's confidence in their nation, their relations, and in themselves in order to wield the will of a foreign power over time, to yield, to submit. This is how you conquer people without physically destroying them or harming them. In The Art of War, Lao Tzu said that the best way to win an enemy is to make them lose their will to fight. Lose their will to fight. Lose their will to resist. Resistance is futile. This is happening in the mental environment. We know nothing about the mental environment. We use it to, try to control our kids and affect each other in our relationships, but really at a higher, more powerful level, it's a new arena for us. But this is how life engages itself in the universe around us, probably. They're not destroying worlds, a world of value. That's more valuable than any race that inhabits it. Rare, valuable, and there's competition for it, as we're experiencing here today. So I'd like to read this quote. This is from Carl Nellis from the SALT interview. It's a very kind of famous quote. I think it went viral almost immediately, but it gives us an idea that we should really consider. I'll read it to you. The universe is governed by conservation laws. It's probably reasonable to assume the laws of nature that we understand apply everywhere. And so those laws are governed by conservation rules. There's conserved quantities. So this really forces a Darwinian type competition in order to survive. Take a moment and think about this. Other possibilities may exist, but we cannot neglect or abandon this approach if we want to deal with this force realistically and intelligently. This is nature. We're destroying a planet that's valued by others. They cannot live here, so they need our help. So they have to subdue us, win us by persuasion or by threat. Whatever the narrative is necessary. It's amazing. We never think about conquest in these terms. And yet we're very vulnerable to this. Our minds are consumed with each other, ourselves, our issues, our problems, our desires. We have paying very little attention even to our own natural environment. So we're unprepared for hurricanes, we're unprepared for all the natural events that are happening in the world destructively. Unprepared, didn't see it coming. Consumed, obsessed. It's also important to think that if aliens are physical beings, and I'm proposing that they are from the universe, they've already likely faced competition to evolve and to become competitive in a universe of limited resources and habitable environments. They've already faced competition to evolve and to become competitive in a universe of limited resources and habitable environments. We're not talking about a magic kingdom of enlightened beings out there hoping to raise us up to the level of vibration. That's a dream. We're now facing such competition because this is how nature works. It's not just my assertion, this is how nature works. We've forgotten how nature works. We're living in our own realm of assumption, presumption, and emphasis on our own views and ideas. Meanwhile, nature is at work. You change the environment, the species declines. That's nature. Unalterable if we continue doing what we're doing. This goes to this important quote. This is by the historian George Santayana. A generation which ignores history has no past and no future. A generation which ignores history has no past and no future. People don't know their past. We don't know the history of our world. We don't know the history, unless you're a European or live perhaps in the Middle East, where your past is super important in terms of your understanding where you are today. America, which is a land of opportunity, where the only natives are the original people here. Everyone else are imported from beyond, and to have a new kind of life and new kind of history. He also is famously quoted as saying, "Those who do not study history are bound to repeat it." Yeah. So this is a lesson of life for us now, to recognize and to follow. So freedom in the universe is not a right, it's a privilege. It's an accomplishment. To be free in this universe, very difficult. If you have a planet of value, there will always be, to some degree, competition for it, or access to it, if not control of it. So to be free in this universe is to really be very private. Don't travel around having relations with other nations. Yikes, that's possible within your own network of free nations, yes. But in the larger universe, where freedom is unknown, certainly not practiced, that's hazardous. So freedom in the world and the universe has to be won and defended against all opposing forces. We don't just submit and give ourselves over. Oh, they're going to save us. They're going to uplift us. They're our brothers, they're our sisters. I mean, wow. Here are the keys to the kingdom. It's yours now. So freedom is not free, and it will be opposed by all in the world and beyond who challenge us for what we have. It's a law of life. You can't change it. You lock your door at night to prevent people from entering and taking what you have. You watch your purse walking down the street so people don't just take it off your shoulders. This is life. You're either wise within it or you're foolish. And those who are foolish do not prosper and do not survive. So the conclusion is the universe is a competitive environment on a scale we can't even imagine. Because resources of habitability are rare. Perhaps a habitable planet is 1 out of 50,000 planets. Not habitability, not just there's some kind of basic life there, but habitable environment. Breathable atmosphere, water if you need water, but basic resources for what you need. Rare. Any race that has that, there will be competition with them and for them. So there's no magic kingdom, only a determined united race can survive and be free in the universe, where freedom is rare. This is a message from the Allies of Humanity briefings. But it's also a lesson in life. In our country, the United States, if we don't take care of our freedom, others will predominate over us. In our own world. So this is life in the physical. Let us realize that life in the physical is not the same as life in the spiritual realm. They're completely different from each other, though they do overlap. And the extent they overlap means that what is spiritual can guide us in our physical life here. But never confuse the two, where they both go out of focus. Spiritual realm goes out of focus, gets very fuzzy. The physical realm is very fuzzy. People end up being very fuzzy about both of them. But what's eternal is not the same as what's temporal at all. We need the infinite to guide us. But we live in a finite world with finite resources, finite opportunities, and the challenge of intervention, challenges of nature. This is nature. So when we go back to nature, the picture gets a lot clearer, and there really are no endless opportunities or distinctions to be made. Oh, it could be this, and it could be that, and it could be anything. Whatever your thoughts and philosophy or desires or preference indicates. No, this is kind of it. So we're not facing an alien presence on these terms. Even though it's demonstrating no benefit to us, it's not attacking us directly. It is in the background, however. What it does to people they take, that's violent. What it's doing between nations, that's to generate war. They're trying to degrade the power of all powerful nations in the world through conflict with each other, of course. That's how you do it. So I'm giving you a very raw and sober approach to this because we are the people who are facing intervention. We are the native peoples of the world facing intervention. We can defeat it because it's not military. It controls the skies, but doesn't control the land. And if we do not submit to it or succumb to it, it cannot control us. So its power of us is significant, but limited. And there's reason why they're not military, and I don't have time to go into that today. That's a whole other talk, which I will get to in time. But I want us to know and think about these things. This is a walk around for you. Don't just say, oh, I don't agree with that, or I think it's something else. Walk around it. Intelligent person walks around anything that is contrary to their views or that could be important. There's no automatic dismissal. Oh, that's not true. That can't be true. I don't believe that. That's not intelligent. What I'm presenting to you today has all of history behind it as validation. And is irrefutable on this level. You can argue over different aspects of it or timing of it, but the overall thing is irrefutable. But this is not where people are coming from when you assess an alien presence in the world. And that is a big problem. So to stop the intervention requires a clear assessment and a growing united resistance to its presence. It is here for the world, remember, not for us. We're only an asset to them, a useful species to subject. But this intervention depends on human submission. That's the key. If it was here by force, well, then that's a different story. But it's not dominating us with technology. It's dominating us with persuasion and dissuasion. That's power in the universe. You should always remember that. They're playing a long game. They don't expect to do this in 10 or 20 years. They're waiting humanity degrades through environmental decline, economic decline, resource depletion, to a point where they would appear and look utterly beneficial to us because we would need them under those circumstances. We'd be easily persuaded if we were in crisis to that level. So it's important for us to deal with this deeper state of awareness within us, with its native to us, spiritually. I'm just talking about physically. It's not a tribal awareness as much as it's an innate awareness, deeper intelligence called knowledge within us, which is not deceived by any of this stuff or each other. It's the one part of us that cannot be overwhelmed or deceived. It's God's great gift to us, largely unrecognized and unused by people. But for people who do recognize and use it, it gives them great advantage competitively in the world, but also beneficially in the world. For knowledge is not here to set us against each other, but to teach us to work together for our common good. So in the end, for us, it's about seeing, knowing, and taking action. Can you see this for what it is? Can you basically get what it is? You don't need all the details of, their technology and how they got here, where they came from. That's not even important right now. That's not noble to us. If that was given in a term, we wouldn't understand it. It would have no meaning. It's what they're doing here. It's an intervention. Without our permission, without our consent, without our awareness. What this means for us, ultimately, is that humanity's destiny is to take a place in this larger universe as a free nation. Universe of intelligent life, a competitive universe, where resources are rare. We're not even grown up enough to be a free race in the universe currently. Fighting each other endlessly, degrading each other, competing for the last resources of the world, because for historical, religious, or vendetta reasons, certainly for resource reasons, we're an easy mark for foreign power to come and intervene for their benefit. But our destiny is out there. But to be a free race in the universe is quite an accomplishment. It's not a right, it's an accomplishment. There's no rights of freedom out there. The universe is a tough place to survive. Huge, empty, cold, bitter, devoid of life. To establish yourself and sustain yourself in this environment takes real unity for a race. And so we don't have that unity. And I think the only thing that will engender that unity is a threat from beyond. If we're offered opportunity, it will divide us. If this intervention offers opportunity, it will divide us. Because only a few people will have that opportunity, receive it. But if it's a threat, it unites us because we're all threatened equally. Think about that. Benefit divides us. Threat unites us. I can see nothing else that unite a fractured humanity in growing contention within itself than a threat from beyond, a veiled threat. Not a military threat, but a veiled, implanted threat, such as we are facing now. It's being challenged by forces from the universe. They've been studying us for a long time. We've been broadcasting out in space for 100 years. They probably know more about us than we do. So they've prepared for us, but we're not prepared for them. They're here for the world. They're not here for us. These are very important to understand. If you don't understand these, then you're lost in the world of desire and ambition, expectation, fantasy. You're not living in the real world. This is species competition for who will be preeminent in the world, who will be the apex species in the world. And the intervention is relying upon human submission. It cannot take the world by force. And that is really important to understand. Because if we will not submit, it cannot succeed. If we understand what it is and why it is here and how it's exerting itself, we will not submit. If we will not submit, it cannot succeed in gaining our attention, our devotion, or control over us. So in the universe, at the threshold of entering the greater community of life in the universe, we must resist intervention. No favorable race is intervening in humanity. The allies of humanity make this very clear, that no beneficial to race would intervene in the evolution of humanity. For to do that, they would have to take control of humanity, which they are not willing to do. This distinguishes a beneficial race from one that is not beneficial. No beneficial race would involve themselves in the world such as occurring now. This is a teaching about freedom from those in the universe who've had to fight for their own freedom, who faced interventions very similar to what we're facing, who are called upon by higher spiritual powers to give their testimony to humanity, to prepare us for a reality that we're just failing to understand. 50 years of UFO research, and we're not understanding this. How can that be? So this will require us to maintain the resources of life on Earth. We're not going to go out in the universe to get them. Beyond this solar system, these resources are owned by others far more powerful than we are. Our world and our solar system is all we have as a resource base. But it's enough if we manage it responsibly. If we don't manage it responsibly, we become weak, contentious, disorganized, break down, and that's a perfect environment for intervention to occur and to succeed. I believe intervention, though it's the greatest challenge to freedom humanity has ever faced, probably the greatest challenge we've ever faced, it holds the key to the one thing that can unite an increasingly fractured humanity. So always remember, this is the thing that will save us, or it could be the thing that destroys us. Has both those potentials. Which will we choose? There's some things we could do, what you can do. So some things I'm going to recommend. I want you to learn about and think about this intervention in terms of nature and history. Because it's factual. It's not theoretical. It's not subjective. It's just how history works. What has happened is how history works. Natural history, human history. The only thing that will unite a fractured humanity is a threat from beyond. We're not going to solve all of our differences, rectify all of our political theories without something forcing us from the outside to do this. Now, these intervening forces are not here to unite us, but they can unite us if we look at it correctly and respond to it correctly. So keep this challenge of freedom in the forefront. So we have a slide now. I can go through this. This is what you can do. Continue to build your understanding of this phenomenon. Compile your list of trusted experts and witnesses. You have to find these people. They're hard to find. There's a chorus of submission. There's a chorus of pro-intervention people out there. So you have to find these people. Resist the seduction of the intervention and its promises. You have a basis for doing that now. Keep this challenge toward human freedom in the forefront of your thinking. Never assume we're going to have it. It's under threat currently. It has been for some time. Look and question the nature and agenda of the alien presence in the world that we know. We know they're hidden. We know they're non-disclosing. We know they're affecting military sites. We know they're taking people against their will. They're probably influencing leaders of government and having an overall effect on the mental environment of our world. These are discernible. These are knowable. These are being demonstrated. There's now a preparation for our future and destiny in the universe, for a greater community of intelligent life. And I have my resources have been given this over a very long time. I've been studying this phenomenon for 40 years. I've looked at all aspects. I've considered all options. And I've landed on the position that I'm sharing with you today, which is very elemental, which is very substantial, which is beyond human objection and human confusion. It's a great preparation for our future in the greater community, the only preparation of its kind in the world that I'm aware of. Stimulate engagement with others. Bring this up with others. It's no longer a totally taboo subject. People have thoughts about this. They're hearing news about this. There's some awareness of this, even amongst the general population. Speak out more in public and build your assessment over time. This will generate a lot of questions you can't answer, some you don't need to answer. How they fuel their craft, we don't need to know that. Where do they come from? We don't need to know what world they come from. How do they think? How are they organized? We don't really need to know that. It's probably not knowable exactly. But what they're doing in the world is being demonstrated with every passing day. So just remember, freedom is not a right, it's an accomplishment. And we need people to get into this game and to enter this arena of awareness, because there are very few of us who are in this arena. And there's a lot of deception from the intervention, a lot of manipulation over this arena, but there are still people here who see the situation clearly and are encouraging others to respond. There's a journey to take. We need to confront this reality clearly in the context that I'm talking about here today. So all of us, humanity, is facing competition within a non-human universe with a non-human intelligence over who will be preeminent in this world. If we fail together. If we succeed together. This is a huge call to action and requirement for human unity. Thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you so much, Marshall, for this really important teaching. And there are some resources we'd like to share with you to support your education regarding assessing and understanding the alien presence in our world. And the first slide shows The Greater Community, which is a book that's published and up online on the newmessage.org website. And one of the chapters, chapter 1, is called out here to look at and consider, and that's humanity's emergence into the greater community. Then there's an entire book, another book, Preparing for the Greater Community. And one of those chapters is chapter 3, The Essential Truths about the Greater Community. And then, of course, the Allies of Humanity briefings, book 4. There's a 12-point summary that is really kind of clarifies the picture, and it's a nice, easy way to share with other people too. And then, of course, the entire Allies of Humanity briefings, book 1 through book 4. And then also, to stay connected to Marshall's teachings and his broadcasts and when he's speaking, you can go to his YouTube channel, youtube.com/Marshall Vian Summers. And then he's also active on X, which used to be Twitter, and that's x.com/Marshall Summers. So some really good resources for us. So next, we'll have an opportunity to consider a question related to the teaching that Marshall gave today. And then we'll transition to the live broadcast chat for that. Carol Coffey is hosting, and the link is in the description below. So the question for our consideration today in the chat is, humanity, which means us, is facing competition with a non-human intelligence who will be preeminent in this world. With a non-human intelligence over who will be preeminent in this world. If we fail together. If we succeed together. This is humanity's next developmental step. It's a huge call to action for everyone. It requires human unity. So the question regarding that is, how do you feel about this? And what do you see? So let's go to the live broadcast chat and have that discussion.